Bert! Get him! Yeah! Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. I know. It's Wednesday night. You're not going to get it till Thursday. One of these days I'll get back on track. But right now, I've been busy. I just took off. I went to Virginia. I'm in the basement down there in what we call the pump room. I'm remodeling. I demoed a wall. I built a new wall because we rent out the top of the house, Airbnb, and now I'm going to get the basement done. So, excuses. Yeah, first world problems. I know. It's not a first world problem. Have an OnX on your phone. It's the title sponsor of this show, the title sponsor of just about everything I do. I was going to tell you a story about when I pulled up my driveway here. I put OnX on, and I was like, between my neighbor's driveway and my driveway, it's kind of like a cedar and hickory and just gum with just a nasty, gnarly wood lot. And I was like, I wonder how close our driveways are. Well, I'm hoping Jimmy doesn't listen to this podcast. I might have put a fence on the wrong line. I'm just saying. It's not bad. It's keeping my dogs from his cats. He told me to put the fence in there years ago. I didn't have OnX years ago. See? It comes in handy for everything. Just like a Gunner transportation kennel. A Gunner kennel for your dog is the safest way to travel. Guaranteed. 100% guaranteed for life. You're not going to beat it. You can't. You want to get some plywood and make a box for your... Okay, that's fine. If you don't want to look like you've been in the end zone before. Okay, but if you want one kennel that'll last you the rest of... Not your dog's life, because your dog's only going to live on the average of 12 years. A Gunner kennel will last you as long as you live. I don't care if you're 20 when you buy it or 15 years old when you buy it. That Gunner kennel will be there. They'll have to give it to somebody. Just like they'll have to give all my stuff to somebody in a few years. Oh, that's a sad thought. Last week I kind of screwed up. I almost forgot about Arxis boots. And then I did like a last minute Hail Mary, 2 seconds left on the clock. And I says, oh, so, I'm just throwing Arxis boots in here right under Gunner Kennels because I want you to go to ArxisUSA.com. I want you to look at boots. These are, this is Jack Butler, right? This is what used to be Gum Leaf. Gum Leaf, you've heard the podcast with Jack and I. You can't do anything about companies folding up and can't produce things in Europe, and it's tough getting good help everywhere. Apparently, it's tough getting good help in Europe. And Jack found us Arxis boots, and I'm telling you what, when you get a rubber boot, you're going to feel just like you know what? You will feel like you've been in the end zone. In fact, if you had most of my stuff, not my stuff, but my sponsor stuff, which is my stuff, like Boss shot shells, I mean... Talk about being in the end zone? Really? Yeah. How about feeding your dog Purina Pro Plan? Yeah, looks like you've been in the end zone. Somebody sees you walking out of the Farm and Fleet with a bag of Old Roy, and you shake hands with him, you bump into him by the parking lot. Oh, what kind of dog you have? Oh, I got a Springer Spaniel. And you see he's feeding Old Roy? No, we don't do that. Feed Purina Pro Plan or any of the Purina unbelievable foods for your dogs. If you think that's, well, anyway, I'm only going to record this once, okay? So you're getting it. Sometimes it takes me 20 takes to do this. I got to get this out. I got to get the TV back on. I got to sit down. I got to have, well, hang on a minute. I already have hang on. Oh, I needed that. It's late. I don't usually do this at 8 o'clock at night. Where was I? We did Boss. We did Purina. Did we do Marshwear? No. Am I wearing Marshwear right now? I'm wearing the Buxton pants. I'm telling you, this is going to be... I got to call up and get a couple more pair because on the way here, once again, my cigar burnt a hole in the leg. But that's what you get when you get these lightweight synthetic pants. But they are so comfy. They are so comfy. Check out Marshwear. Did you? Well, this. You know what? I'm going to skip Garmin, not because they're not a sponsor, but because this podcast episode is with Rehan and oh, excuse me, with Rehan and Patrick, and we're going to talk about the new Garmin stuff. So I can skip Garmin, even though I kind of slipped it in, right? W Supply is where you go when you need your Garmin, and when you hear about this new LTE tracking collar, you'll be calling up the boys at W and saying, "God, get me one of those." If you haven't put the four-wheel camper on your truck yet, I understand there's a long lead time. They're not sold. Well, there's only a couple dealerships east of the Mississippi, but look at four-wheel campers, especially the Model M. The Model M, you can customize it any way you want, like I did. It's sitting there telling me, "Come on, let's go hunting." Just like my Mossberg shotguns, like, "Come on, use me, abuse me. You can't break me. I'm a Mossberg." And then when you get done with everything else, and you've got your birds on the ground, your beer in the hand, you clean the birds, and you're sitting there like, "Well, what am I going to do?" Well, you can you could vacuum seal them with a Walton's vacuum sealer. You could spice them up, put them on the grill with Walton spices. You could you could, what else could you do? You could make sausage out, no, nobody makes sausage out of good birds. I would never make sausage out of birds. I thought about it once with a bunch of pheasants. But anyway, go to Walton's. You'll find everything you could possibly need for the upcoming season or this season. It's still season. Cooking season is every day. So you got Walton's, Mossberg, W, four-wheel camper, Garmin, Marshwear, Boss, Purina, Arxis, Gunner, and OnX, the title sponsor of this show. All right, that was 6 minutes, 22 seconds. I'm not going to do it again, and that's a bonus. Now, if you hit skip, that's your fault. Good Lord, I need another beer. Okay. All right, everybody. This is a Garmin-centric episode because I have Rehan Nana and Patrick Bowman on with me. And we're going to talk dogs, we're going to talk guns, we're going to talk what's new in Garmin. And that's where we're going to start off with, guys. I don't think we need too much of an introduction. You guys have been on the show before. But give me the new scoop on the new deal. Who wants to start off with that?
We're hopping right into it. Okay. Well, about a week ago, we had launched a brand new tracking unit. It's called Alpha LTE. And for those of you who are familiar with the Garmin ecosystem and Garmin tracking, you're probably very familiar with the Alpha systems, the TT25s, 15s. But this is something it works in conjunction with it, but it's also a completely standalone unit. And what's really interesting about it is it's LTE tracking. So LTE is cellular-based tracking. So it is a completely autonomous unit, but it also works in conjunction with our existing collars and handhelds for redundancy tracking, but it can also just be completely standalone. So for those of you, I think everybody's familiar with LTE, but for those who aren't, it's pretty much cell coverage. So it operates differently in the sense that with cell towers, it creates kind of like a blanket, and that's how it's communicating its location from that side, or at least within the transmission. It's still using GPS for coordination, but the actual transmission side of it is through LTE. So that's just kind of a top level about Alpha LTE.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about for the guy who only went to high school? What are you talking about? I don't even know how my damn cell phone works. Now you want to...
Let me explain it this way. If you have cell coverage, you have the ability to track with the Alpha LTE. Patrick, you were about to say something?
Yeah, this is also a much cheaper point of entry into the market. If you're a guy that's been looking for something to track your dogs and you just are not quite willing to spend that $1,200 that maybe an Alpha 300 system costs, the Alpha LTE starts at $299.99, so you're in the door at $300. It pairs right up to your phone. And for me, being a lab guy, this unit is crucial for waterfowl hunting and being able to just tie it into the system that I already got. I don't really need the tracking. I don't need the on point or the flushing data that some of your bird dog guys might need, but rather I need it as more of a safety precaution. So for that use case, I mean, it's absolutely perfect for me waterfowl hunting with labs. And there's so many different niches that I think this product will fit in really well.
You know, now that doesn't mean, does that mean if you're in cell service with your cell phone, but yet it's still tied to your Garmin handheld?
So we're going to back up here.
Yeah,
We're going to
please.
back up here.
We need to
So
back up when you're talking to me.
when we I mentioned two different things. It operates as a redundancy system to current tracking products. So let's tackle that for a moment.
Yeah.
So if somebody out there has, let's say, an Alpha 300i with a TT25 collar, that's the newest tracking system. The way that the location information gets to the handheld is through this route. There is a GPS location receiver on the dog's collar. So that gets information and gets location. And then what happens is it uses VHF radio to transmit that information to the handheld, right? And so that's where that location is coming from. It's not GPS to GPS to GPS. There's that critical component, which is the VHF radio transmission. So what can happen in unique situations like really, really rugged terrain, or like if you're running a big running dog in mountains, for example, if a dog like rolls over the crest of a hill, the VHF link where it's trying to communicate from the collar to the handheld can be severed. It's just the nature of VHF technology where it's like it needs to have some sort of line of sight. So historically, when that would happen is you try to get to the last point, or you try to get to a high point so that the collar and the handheld can reestablish connection, right? Those two are always going to be looking for one another, right? So for everybody out there, that's just a tip. If you don't end up getting an Alpha LTE, and that does ever happen, a question mark comes up, just try to get to a high point to try to reestablish contact, or the last location from that side. So what's really unique about Alpha LTE is since it operates on a completely different system, you can pair it in with your TT25. And what will happen in that situation is if tracking is ever lost through VHF, LTE automatically slides in and picks up the line of coverage, right? So when you look at it, that is the most robust tracking that Garmin offers, right? Those two in combination. And it offers, in a way, a belt and suspenders approach to dog tracking, right? So that is how it works for the redundancy tracking system, which is really, really unique. And so you find that, like I said, if you're in really tough terrain or houndsman, and like I said, so long as you got cell service, you've got that backup system, right? So that is the redundancy side of it. And what Patrick is mentioning here is the standalone aspect, which I run a lab now. We just had to put our setter down. So it's like I still run, tracking on my Labrador. And that, since it operates alone, you can just slip that thing on any 1-inch collar and you effectively turn any collar into a tracking collar so long as you got cell service. Right. That's hopefully explains it a little bit better about
Because I didn't really, I told you before we hit record, I don't even know how my cell phone works, but but I get what you say VHF, because if a dog's over a hill or down a valley, cell service kind of goes like a blanket over the ground, right? It doesn't travel on street, and VHF, things can get in the way of VHF.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're a guy that regularly hunts within LTE coverage, but you hunt in some really nasty terrain where you're constantly having VHF drop off, adding an Alpha LTE into your system is going to do you a lot of good. You're going to see a lot less drop offs, a lot less frequent, and just more reliable tracking overall.
Yeah. And, at surface level, there's that side of it, which is the redundancy tracking side of it. And this thing, for listeners out there who can't see, it's super, super light. It's about the size of a Matchbox car, right? Think about that, right? And so that's all you really need. You need that and a cell phone, and you can effectively start tracking. And like I said, at surface level, it's kind of like, well, okay, redundancy tracking is great, but it's also when you really start looking into it, it's such a handy unit for a number of different reasons. Patrick mentioned waterfowl. I have the same problem where it's like you're going into a blind at 3 a.m. It's dark. Your dogs are running around. Boats are going everywhere. It's just kind of peace of mind to know where your dog's at. The these alpha units, like if we look at the Alpha 300i, it's a substantial unit. It's a pretty big unit because it's got a lot of horsepower to it.
Right.
So if you're just going kind of for a hike, or you're just going to kind of a back 40 and you want to go light and fast, with the Alpha LTE, you just slip that on the collar and you can use that as a standalone within
Yeah.
its. Another really interesting fact about LTE is VHF has a range with it, right? So the collars can go up to 9 miles, right? And I always kind of joke, well, if you got a dog going further than 9 miles, God help you, because Garmin can't, right? But now it can actually,
Now
because
it can.
LTE doesn't have an effective range, so to speak, right? So really, you could be sitting in Minnesota and be watching your dog in Florida, so long as you got cell service.
Okay, now that's what I was wondering, because I pictured now again, I'm sure Garmin did not make this for the few individuals that have 9 mile dogs, but I had a buddy literally on his way home from North Dakota using a dog trailer. The trailer, somebody didn't latch the back door. The dog got out 4 hours later, and this is from Wisconsin to Illinois. So pretty flat. There's cell service all the way down the expressway. They stopped. They saw the door just, hanging open. And of course, panic ensued. They assumed somebody stole the dog. Now, it has a happy ending because the dog did get out at that stop. They just didn't know it. And like all friendly, like good friendly dogs, they go running off, go see somebody else walking a dog, and then they pull away. So if he had this LTE on him, he could have saw his dog one state away, two state away. All that's peace of mind. Somebody at
Yeah.
Garmin must have had a dog like my Zygon who used to run away all the time and said, someday I'm going to invent the ultimate tracking collar. Ah, that's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and you hit it on the head. For me, it's all about the safety aspect, right? I think this is a product that you could put on any dog anywhere across the globe, and now have tracking capability, assuming you're within LTE coverage. But there's so many use cases, like Rehan mentioned, being a hiker, a camper, any slew of sporting dog, whether you're a hound guy, upland bird dog hunter, waterfowl guy, just myself, as me and Rehan were bouncing ideas off each other before this thing came out. I brought up a story of my dog walking into a marsh a couple of years ago, and we're walking in, and I went one direction, another group went another direction, dogs just following headlights. We're setting decoys. We got all sorts of things going on. Next thing I know, I turn around and dog is nowhere to be found. Luckily, I was able to walk back to the entrance of the public marsh, and the other group was nice enough to walk my dog back to me, so we were reunited. But that was a case where I was absolutely freaking out for about 30 minutes. But with a product like Alpha LTE, having been on my dog, I would have just been able to pull up my phone, known exactly where that dog was, and been able to get to him a lot quicker. So
Yeah. And in that situation, I mean, like with waterfowl, it's like you got so much gear you're carrying in. So just to be able to slip that on a collar and you've got your phone with you,
Yeah. I
it's
mean, I would slip it. I could leave it in my truck and use it so I can find my truck when I'm in the grouse woods. I mean, because this is true. I'm not always sarcastic, but I am 80% of the time. I I have one of these, and that's dog number 3 in my truck when I go hunting and I'm in the woods. I
just
don't
mark it on your handheld, mark truck on your handheld. Like that, we got that covered for you.
I know you do, because everybody says, "Oh, just mark a waypoint, mark your truck."
I
I
mean,
don't
you can
want
do
to
it
mark.
on the watch,
I
you can
just
do it
want
on
to
the
look at my
handheld.
I just want to look at my 550 and go, dog 3 that way. And I just I don't have to do anything. Oh, dog, that's truck is dog 3. So
I get it. People do that, and like whatever works for you. And I think that that's just kind of like the entirety of the Garmin ecosystem, especially when you look at like 300, how that got kind of changed, and those units become so customizable, because it's like the three of us may hunt the same thing, but how we hunt is
right.
entirely different. And
And
so that's
how much you like technology. Like,
totally. And
you
I
know,
mean,
I have a question. Somebody asked me this the other day. I should have kept the email. So, the 300i, has every bell and whistle, besides actually showing you if it's a hen or a rooster when it's on point, right? And
Writes notes
but
down.
right, and people like the tracking, like to watch their dog track everything. With my 550 plus, I can do that on my cell phone, can't I? I
Yeah.
can get, yeah. I told them that, and they said, "Are you sure?" Because
Yes,
they wanted the simplicity of the 550 as far as a training collar. And I said, if you like that data, and this guy likes to walk 15 miles a day, and I said, I'm 99% sure you've told me or someone's told me that you can just upload the Garmin app on your phone, and at the end of the day, you could get all that information.
yeah, so that's a feature that we actually tied in when we came out with our Alpha 10, which is a very similar system to the Pro 550 Plus. It's not as training oriented, rather, it's just a really small tracking unit, Ron. I know that you've seen one and played around with one. But when we came out with Alpha 10, we actually moved everything to the Garmin Explore app. So now you can pair your Pro 550 Plus, your Alpha 10, your Alpha 300, or any of your newer tracking systems into your app. So you can see it on your handheld, but you can also see it right there on your phone via the Explore app, which is really cool. Another app that we just came out with is the Alpha app, which actually pairs to the Alpha LTE, which has now taken over compatibility with all those units as well. So now you can either do it through the Explore app or the Alpha app on your phone.
You guys have been a little busy in the last, how, and not to get trade secrets, but um, how long does something like this take to develop? Or has it just always been, I wonder if we can? Or do you guys just like in the food industry, when I would do like a huge conveyor system for a year, we'd have a we'd have a finish date with an idea, and then we worked our way back with a schedule. Did somebody say, I want to make this, or did somebody go, if we let's just play with this? How does that happen with a unit like this?
Yeah, so this actually launched initially in Europe, EMEA first, a little while ago. Because I'm sure you're familiar with this, but how they hunt there is a little bit different.
Mhm.
It could be one dog that is helping 10 different people hunt on big game. And so historically, they were all using individual handhelds. And with this one, it just became incredibly easy for them to all see kind of where that dog was. So without giving you trade secrets, that's kind of like this has been used and it's a great unit. And then when we looked at the United States, we saw all the different use cases for it. And
Yeah.
so that's when we really started to bring it to market here.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. You got some,
And I'd also like to note two different things on this one. One, this is a track only unit. So it does not have training capabilities with it. But with that said, this is, I mean, I ran Garmin before I worked here, right? And it's because you can trust it.
Yeah.
And this is the same unit, right? Where it may be small, but it's mighty and it's built to the standards that you'd expect from a Garmin product for a sporting dog unit.
Yeah, it's light as a feather. It's almost like it's so light. I'm feeling like, oh, I must have to put some AA batteries in it to make it weigh something, right? It's really, I don't know, what is it, 4 ounces or something? I don't know what it is. It's super
Yeah.
50 grams.
50 grams. What you know what? They might be able to start putting these. I helped band or put a radio collar on a sharp tail a couple months ago in
Mm.
Wisconsin, and that unit was. I think you could put this on the back of a pheasant. I'm just,
Well,
no,
I mean, when you look, I mean, not everyone can see us if you're listening online and don't have video, but when you look at the two collars side by side, I mean, a TT25 collar compared to a Alpha LTE, I mean, the size difference is just incredible. The fact that this device can still track and pair up to your phone, but is, less than half the size of a TT25 is pretty remarkable.
So, and again, I'm doing these questions. They're not trying to be softball, but let's say peace of mind. You don't use it like I use very little electronic stimulation with my dog unless it's a deer run. I know people that hunt and bang away at their dog all day, and I got rid of those dogs years ago. And if a person just wanted to take a hike, they don't even need a 550 or an alpha unit. They just need this and their cell phone.
Correct.
And then you've got that peace of mind for, like you said, for hiking, for traveling. I mean, yeah, I got a feeling that thing's going to be used on a lot more things than just dogs. I would,
Well, As Patrick mentioned, right, it's a really easy one to get into because it's $2.99, right? So
Yeah.
really from that side, you do need a subscription with it, and it's an annual subscription, and it's $50 a year.
Mhm.
Uh, but really, when you're looking all in there, you have a complete tracking unit, LTE tracking unit for what is it?
Three
Man,
hundred
not doing
$50 for a year.
obviously I didn't major in math.
Right.
So 300 there.
You also
Um,
didn't major in studio design yet because you guys are you guys are in the new Garmin studio, and I'm like, no, you're not. You're on a white background in somebody's office room. So
I was
gotta work
waiting.
on that a little
I was waiting for this, Ron. Listen, we're proud of it. You don't have to be proud of it. We're proud of it. We're going to work on getting our logo in here. This is brand new, brand spanking new,
bit.
just as new as the LTE.
As I believe this is the second podcast ever filmed out of this new studio. So we're working on it. We'll make some improvements. Hopefully by the time you get in house and we film the hunting dog podcast episode out of this studio, we'll have it real built up just right for
Are
you.
you guys going to have cameras all the time?
For
Or
the
you
podcast.
just are you going to have just audio and are you going to actually record video?
No, we got all the recording potential you could imagine.
So now I'm going to have to move to Kansas.
If you'd like.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? We'd love to have you down, Ron. It's a
Well,
pretty good nexus, really, when you look at it. Like, people kind of know this, but I always say it's a really good nexus for bird hunting, right? Because it's like you got Kansas City, Kansas and Missouri, but you got Kansas to the west. You got, within a few hours, you got Nebraska, Iowa, which is coming back. Missouri, been having a tough time recently, but I cut my teeth there. So I still like hunting there. You got Arkansas just down the way. So it's a pretty good place if you're a bird hunter.
yeah, no, everybody. I mean, I think that that's probably become more and more. It's always had a certain amount of popularity, but it's becoming way more of a destination. When people just start talking about on podcasts with the walk-in access that the WEHA that Kansas has.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do have a good
when you
program for
run
that.
into bird hunters and they know what the acronym is, there's people going to Kansas. And we're not on schooners going on the Oregon Trail. I mean, we're looking for birds. How about you got anybody have a bird report? I know you guys waterfall probably a little more than anything, but how's things looking in Kansas? Because I'm in Virginia, we're in a drought. In Michigan, we're getting ready to build an ark. And I don't know what out west is doing. What's Kansas doing?
I mean, I feel like quail were up last year. Pheasant, I think we're having a tougher time with it. It's, things fluctuate pretty drastically, unfortunately. But I mean, there's still some really good shining spots in there. You just kind of got to know where to look. I mean, they've had some tough time with weather as well. So that's that. But whenever I get down, there was somebody told me once years ago, I was worried. There was bad reports coming out, and he was an older guy, and I was just lamenting, like, oh man, the sky is falling with Chicken Little. And he just like looked at me and he was like, there's always birds somewhere. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There always are birds somewhere. You just kind of gotta figure out where it is year over year. So
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart or a person who wants to just hunt within 50 miles of home. That's not bird hunting.
no,
So you would have to
no.
hunt in a couple of spots.
I was up in Minnesota last year, did all right on some pheasant, waterfowl up there. Iowa, pretty good on pheasant there.
Iowa's been killing it the last couple
Yeah,
of years in bird numbers.
Well, in 2001, Iowa had 1 million bird pheasant harvest, and then by 2010, I think it dropped down to like 100,000.
Yeah.
And the reports that I was reading, I think it was Todd Bogenschutz, who's the biologist out there. He was saying that, and I think their numbers are up like around 350 or something like that on harvest, which is great to see it. Like they've been doing a lot of work, I think, on waterways and stuff like that. But I think what he was saying, he's like, listen, our numbers should be higher than they are currently. It's just that our hunter numbers have dropped off so significantly.
Yeah.
So that's that. That
That's
would be
good news. It's good news.
hopefully give us, more than us these days. I got a little 2.5-year-old running around. I don't get out nearly as much as I should. What are your bird numbers looking like? Where can what spots of yours can I take?
You can come to northern Muskegon County because we're almost out of birds. You can have, I'll let you have the house in Virginia. You can hunt the Blue Ridge Mountain or you can hunt the Appalachians. You'll see at least a grouse a day.
Is
So,
that's a serious question. I've always been kind of curious about grouse hunting because it's like, man, I feel like even Tennessee has a grouse season, or maybe they just closed it.
yeah,
Like,
they do. They do, but
what
they
is
just don't
it?
have a lot of good grouse habitat anymore. There's still a grouse around there, but it's funny, this area in Virginia, before I got the place I came down here for a job in 2003. And in 2005, we bought it because we knew we were going to be here for a decade on this project. And my neighbor told me when he knew I had bird dogs, he said, "You ought to go down the bottom of that fence line down there by Tom's Corn." He said, "There used to be a covey of quail there." So I did, and there wasn't. And it turns out probably 5 years before that, there was still three coveys right around this house where, out in this field. And the quail are pretty much gone from the Shenandoah Valley. But the grouse hunting, I had a friend I met here, and we're still two of them. We're still buddies, and one of them was a casual grouse hunter, which stuck to the trails, and the other guy was a mountain biker, and he would regularly take 20 rough grouse a year out of basically one county here in Virginia. Now you have to have legs like a billy goat to do it, and he had a couple really good French Brittany's that were just balls. I mean, I watched them dogs. I didn't know who had better set of legs, him or the dogs. I mean, honest to God, we'd be on a trail and he'd see a side hill of laurel and he'd say, "I'm gonna go check that out." And I couldn't go down there without rappelling ropes. And the dogs would just take off, go down there and boom, knock out a bird.
It's like
Um,
chucker hunting, but for
oh,
grouse.
to that old guy saying, there's always birds somewhere.
Yeah,
You gotta find them.
you're willing to go down there.
You gotta find. Have either of you ever hunted South Dakota for waterfowl?
Yes, I have. It's been a few years, but
Because you have to put in for a draw, for not a draw, but it's kind of like a draw.
You
They
do,
only
yeah.
they only allow so many non-residents, and
It is very similar to a draw. I'm not sure the exact system. Obviously, hopefully Rehan has some more info, but um, man, when you're up there pheasant hunting, it is a duck hunter's dream, man. I mean, I'll tell you
yeah,
what.
I know. And this year, I called my buddy Connor, or he called me, and we are just shooting the shit. And he said, "Did you put in for waterfowl for South Dakota? Because a lot of years you'll get it. I think you'll almost guarantee to get it within 2 years, but a lot of times you'll get it on first try." And I said, "I've been talking to myself about that for 25 years." And he says, "Ron, you gotta do it." So he's stopped. He's a sales rep. He stopped and he goes, "Hang on a minute, let me check." He says, "You got to do it. You got to apply by July 8th, from June something to July 8th." I said, "Great, I'll do it." That was a Friday. I said, "Well, I'll do it on June 8th. That's Monday, right?" It closed. It,
I know what you
Close.
yeah.
it closed at 8 o'clock in the morning.
That happened to me this year. My buddy was like, "Hey, I applied and I'm getting it. You should, or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. I'll apply by the end of the day." And it's 8 a.m. So it's
Right.
to me.
I mean, why would they bother doing that? Like, who's going to be, you know,
Just close it the night before. Close it at
yeah,
midnight the day
say
before.
midnight the 7th. That way, people who like, not that I couldn't have got online on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
I said, "You know what? I'll just do it on Monday. It's open till Monday."
Ron,
What were
I'm
you
sure
trying to
it's
apply for,
clearly
Rehan?
explained. I'm sure it's clearly explained. Like you and I just didn't even bother to look at the rules.
There's
So,
probably a there's probably a chance of that. There's probably a chance of that. Um,
yeah.
and
Uh,
and I was trying to go on the website and immediately I'm like, well, good, they're open. So I called. South Dakota is really great. You can call in and get your license if you don't want to do any computer work or do it on your phone. You can just call them up and do it right over the phone. And I asked the lady, and I said, I can't figure out the waterfowl thing. She says, "Well, it's closed." I said, "No, it's open till the 8th." And that's when she said 8 in the morning. I'm like,
yeah.
so another year before I get it. Damn it. Damn it.
Well, we'll next year you call me, I'll call you as a reminder, and we'll make sure we apply at the right time.
Put it on our calendars. Yeah. Um, where did you guys hunt this year for the most part?
For the most part, like I said, I was in Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, and I did have a chance to get out to Idaho,
Oh,
um, which was a really kind of unique experience. I don't hunt in the West enough in that capacity, but it was a really, really interesting kind of experience. I was hunting with Gordons there, some really just stellar Gordons. Like, I used to have a red setter, and I'd hunted over, I think, like one or two Gordons, and but a guy named Tom out there, he was a really nice guy, and he took me out as a favor. And these dogs were incredible. I mean, they were just going up and down mountains. I mean, it was trying to find Chucker, Hun, and quail out there. And we didn't get into Chucker, but we did see some Huns and quail. And it was really interesting because, in the Midwest, kind of in the breadbasket, like there was those days where, you could see quail running across the road, and you still occasionally do. But in the limited time that I was hunting out there, it was a really breath of fresh air to see just birds in a good habitat.
yeah.
I guess what I'd say there.
Kind of like when you see a lot of pheasants on the road in the Dakotas.
Yeah, it's the same
Every
thing.
afternoon you see them
You see that
scooting
kind of
across.
like, oh yes, this is going to be great type of
Right.
thing.
Doesn't mean you'll find them. How about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I actually didn't get out for a single upland bird hunt this year, but I had the most ever waterfowl hunting days under my belt this past season, which is which was very cool. So I started my season off up in Canada, also the first time ever up there. So we went up on the Saskatchewan-Alberta line just west of Saskatoon. And it was an incredible trip, man. I mean, it's everything that anyone has ever talked about. If you've been thinking about going up to Canada to waterfowl hunt, I highly recommend it if you've never done it. We're actually going back this fall again. It just had a little bit too much fun, but
Can I
we
come?
hunt. Yeah, you're always invited, Rehan. But then we hunted Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana this year for waterfowl. Little bit of everything, big ducks, teal, Canada geese. Didn't get much snow goose or speckle belly geese hunting in this year, but it was a good season overall. The conditions were really tough last fall. A lot of drought, not much water anywhere across the country or in Canada. So to scratch out what we did was pretty special. And I'm really looking forward to this year. We've had great rain all the way through the spring. We've had periodic rain all summer. So this should be full wetlands next fall. Very exciting.
Nice. Yeah, I was trying to get, I think we were talking, I was trying to get back to Kansas in January, and a couple of my friends, they were like on the edge. I'm like, look, I got to either tell this guy we're going to rent his farmhouse or not, right? And they said, oh, I don't know. I made the boneheaded move of sending the guy some cash for the farmhouse. And then we got the only snowstorm we've got in West Michigan in the last 5 years the week before.
Oh no.
And I called the guys up. I said, yeah, don't worry about the deposit. I'm not going to go. And they said, well, and they asked why. And I said, because we finally got dumped. Like Michigan, we're in the lake effect snow belt. When I moved here, it was nothing to get 3-4 inches of snow a night just from the lake. And we finally got this big storm, and it was going to keep coming, lake effect all week. And I just knew, like, I didn't have the snow thrower on the tractor because my neighbor kid's been doing it. My wife's going to say, how come? My wife's going to need wood in the wood stove, even though we don't use the wood stove anymore. I didn't have that. I had like four. There's probably like 10 factors when a husband knows they shouldn't leave on a trip. And I was hitting 4 of those markers. I canceled my trip. And then I heard it was so bad that what I would have maybe got in waterfowl would have been really tough. Would have been really tough.
Yeah.
Because everything was so dry.
Man, and I mean, it was the whole country this past fall. It didn't matter where you were, everywhere was dry and had no water. I mean, like I said, we were lucky to do what we did. This fall should be much better. From everything that I've seen up north, waterfowl bird numbers have looked good, from the Dakotas all the way up through Canada. And so, it should be in for a pretty good fall.
TBD on the upland side of things around here. I mean, we had some pretty hard snaps during the winter, which normally, you talk to biologists and they say, yeah, don't worry about it. Those birds can make it, and they can. It's just like when you get like ice on top of ice on top of freezing weather, it gets really tough on them. And, you know, so TBD, I mean, like we've been getting some rain this year. Hopefully nesting doesn't get flooded out from that side. But we'll see. But yeah, even last year it was so dry from an upland perspective. A lot of what we were doing is just trying to focus on water sources wherever we were going.
Yeah.
Try to get around water sources, and that's where we were finding success on that side. So I don't know, but hope springs eternal, right? So I think that there's always birds somewhere.
It, it springs eternal in the, I can't say the rest of that quote, but it springs eternal. It does spring eternal. Let's jump to dogs a little bit. You just mentioned did you lose your last dog, your setter, or is he retired from hunting, Rehan?
No, lost. It was she was about 12. She had a lot of miles under her. And it was they say like, and I've lost dogs before, but this, that was a special dog. And it's just like, they say sometimes they let you know. And it was very apparent. It happened within like 3 days. And all things considered, that's just the way it happened. We actually lost two, my wife's dog as well. So I'm down to one dog, and it's a Labrador, and she's good. She's pulling double duty on a lot of different stuff. She's about 3.5 now, so that's be coming into her fourth season. I'm pretty happy with where she was at, but it was my first time training a retriever, and I feel like I left a lot on the table. I two up, she's out of a Hammer and Hank dog, and then one up, she's out of Chaos. And it's like I joke, I'm like, don't get a dog out of a dog named Chaos if you're about to have a baby. Like that's just life lesson I learned a little too late.
Yeah.
But it was.
There's the list of things you don't go on a trip for, and there's a list of names you don't want in your dog's lineage.
Yeah. So, but no, great dog, and like her, I joke like her and my daughter are just like litter mates, but I know, and she's good. I realized I did a lot of training, the method of training and how I trained. I was applying a lot of like upland stuff to a waterfowl retriever. And like, I also noticed about myself, what I did was like in a pinch, I was like, I'm going to go upland hunting. Right. And so if I could do that over, I would have probably focused a little bit more on, um, training the dog better, but she's really good. She's a great dog. I'm really happy with her, from that side. So
Patrick, what's your dog's name, your lab? How old is it?
His name's Jack, so he'll actually be 4 this coming September. So he's just getting started, or just getting into that kind of finish stage. He's getting right into his prime, and it's been so fun. Everything that I've done with him's been all by myself. And so he's, first of all, my first dog I've ever trained. So that was a big learning curve for me at the beginning, but to see how far we've come in 4 years is pretty remarkable, honestly. Seeing how well-rounded he's become, and really, getting into gear. This season will be exciting. We've done a lot of work this off season, kind of polishing off some of those final details, and it'll be cool. So
Ron, I live vicariously through Patrick. We come in on Monday during hunting season. I'll just like swing by his desk, and you'll be like, oh yeah, all told, like he tells me his counts on like how many retrieves his dog's getting, and I'm just like, we got 2 pheasant.
We walked 8 miles and we got 2 pheasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a good year last year. I didn't get to bring him to Canada, unfortunately. We flew up there, and he's not allowed on planes, but he got plenty of work in goose hunting here in Kansas and duck hunting over in Missouri. And then that southern tour that we do every year, we go from Arkansas down to Texas. So he got some miles on him for sure.
So I got to ask, just in a training sense, you didn't do, I know you said you didn't do any upland last year. When you got the lab, were you planning on doing both, or were you always kind of concentrating on waterfowl?
This is something that I've talked to so many professional trainers about. And should you go full bore into both? Should you stick to one until they really figure it out? And I think depending on the trainer that you talk to, everyone's got a different opinion. But me going into it, I really, I was a waterfowl hunter. I always have been. I do a fair share of upland bird hunting. And so if I could get him to be a 90% waterfowl dog and a 10% upland dog, I'd be pretty happy with that. And I think that's, pretty much what he's lived up to be. We definitely, our training is entirely waterfowl focused. When he does upland bird hunt, he's a flushing dog and he's a retrieving dog. And I kind of just let him go do his thing and have fun. Obviously, if he gets too far out in front, we'll pull him back a bit. But so most of that training has always been kind of waterfowl forward, and obedience forward is the big one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's nothing worse than a bad day if there's no ducks and you got a bad dog in the boat. Yeah, you could literally think about, I wonder if my gun accidentally went off and hit that dog, how much
Anyway, so about the Alpha 300.
What, so what I was asking is, Rehan, you tended to do, you had the setter and you had your 3.5-year-old lab. People have asked me, can they do both? And with our Upland Institute that we developed for pointing dogs, a lot of Labrador people say, can I use it? And I said, you can use a lot of parts of it for impulse control and retrieving and trained retrieve. But people have told me this, and I've never owned a lab, that if you're gonna do both, that you work on the upland side first, so you kind of find out what kind of go that dog has in the field. But then also you have to throttle it back, because now he needs really good boat manners, blind manners, field manners, where a typical pointing dog does not want to sit through a blind, a field, or a boat, right?
I mean, what I'll say with my setter is I actually that setter we would teal hunt occasionally, and she was okay at that. She wasn't a great waterfowl dog by any stretch of the imagination, but that was that. And when I look at the Labrador, like I said, like I feel like unconsciously, maybe, or because had a lot going on, like I would just kind of default to training within an upland manner. And she's still like, we go and I mean, like probably 3 times a week we're out at the park throwing bumpers and working on manners and stuff like that. But I wonder, and I am not a professional trainer, so this is just my experience here, is because she does have she's got wheels from an upland perspective, that I wonder if with how much upland I was doing at a young age too, and this was like out of the gates, I was, season 1, I was doing upland and waterfowl. Like, I wonder if I had waited a little bit longer and really worked on blind manners, if that would have changed it a little bit later.
Yeah, that's what people wonder. Like, either you'll take something out of the dog, which is hard to take something out of a dog, but you could put the dog, let's say, in so many boat and blind positions that he's never run the field, or what's the right mix of how much field work. We got to find a good guest for the podcast that can solve that.
Yeah, that
To
would
me,
be a great.
I feel like any dog likes being cut loose. So when you cut a dog
Yeah.
loose and they're kind of free to go, they enjoy that. It's the harnessing them back that's really hard to teach, especially a dog with high drive. And when that dog's been taught its whole life to just go and go and go and go, and then you try and reel that back, that's got to be a difficult task. I'd be really curious to talk to someone that trains like that
Yeah.
professionally.
I might get
Yeah.
myself a lab if someone could show me how to do both, and
Right.
I want that 50-50 dog,
Right.
like a 90% dog when he's doing the 50% of the work I want to do that day.
Right. Yep.
Somebody, like, there's 2 things that somebody said where it's like, you really, like, labs are great. Like, I have a double duty lab and it's great, but it's like, really, when you look at like an English pointer, like an EP, it's like they excel at upland. That's what they do. That's what they've been bred for so long. And it's like, you look at a Labrador and it's like a Labrador has been bred for so long, and granted they're upland labs and stuff like that, but genetically, like, they kind of excel. So they're just such a wonderful, incredible waterfowl dog, right?
Right.
And somebody else kind of said, and Patrick kind of touched on it, where it's like, and I've kind of felt this way too, where it's like with pointing dogs, you're trying to coax their instincts out and encourage them, and build that confidence. And sometimes with Labradors, what you're trying to do is fight that urge to just go out immediately,
Right.
and to hold and manners and stuff like that. So that's what I said, like looking at it in hindsight, like really two different styles of training, and that's it.
Right. And you know, in my background, the versatile world, we have the dogs tested with water work and field work, but it's not you it's more like what would you do if something went into the water kind of water work. It's not the and I was told by a breeder years ago, and I always usually only say it when I have a beer because I can write it off to alcohol. He told me that the shape of a lab's eye is a little more oval or it's a little more round. I can't remember which. And that's why they excel at marking, something to do with the rods and the cones. Like they can, they've such a specialist over all these generations that even their eyeball is for marking more so than like a German short hair or Weimaraner or something like that.
Yeah, that was actually something that was really kind of incredible to see in year 1 and 2 from an upland perspective. That lab was so good at marking. You know, she was so good at marking,
Yeah.
or
And
and
it's
that
not like you can give them a seeing test when they're young. Like, hey, are
yeah,
you a? It's just there. And I'll tell you, most pointing dogs, they don't mark that well. Some do. There's always the ones that and I think those sometimes are built on short successes, and they've learned that, oh, it's that far, and they become a good marking dog to a certain distance. But I've seen them in tests where, like, I can't even believe the dog is looking over here because everybody saw the bird fall to the shotgun, like 12 o'clock from the middle of the clock. And the dog's over at 9 o'clock and looking for, like, what were you watching? So, yeah, I got to find the right Labrador guy, breeder, hunter, more importantly, the hunter trainer, um, that could explain that all to me. Because that's pretty fascinating. If you can, the lab is the most popular dog in America. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's the most popular bird dog, hunting dog. Yeah, to do
let me
both.
know when you record that
Yeah.
because I obviously need
You want
to.
to sit in on the Zoom and you can filter some of the questions in.
It's just going to be questions of like, what did I do wrong here? You know?
Well, the crazy unique thing about a lab is its ability to use not just its eyes, not just its ears, not just its nose, but those three in conjunction, which a lot of other sports don't use. It's either endurance or it's nose, or in some
Right,
cases, it's just eyes.
right.
But a Labrador, that's why you see them in so many different facets. You see them waterfowl hunting, you see them upland hunting, you see them be drug detection dogs.
They're
They have
even
all these different
epileptic fit
roles.
dogs. They can
Right,
they
right.
can say, like, yeah, whatever. If God made dogs, he started with the lab. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. That's as far as my religion. My
I
religion.
was going to say, is that your epitaph or what is
It
that?
might be my epithet. Now,
And this
now
is
I
coming
have to
from a
go
lab
back.
guy, so maybe I'm biased, but
No, they're all, I mean, like, they're all incredible in their own way, right? Like,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
it's really just fascinating to like when you learn about what the history of where they came from, like you really start understanding like, oh, okay, these are people forget that many times they're specialized tools, but they're just so incredible in what they do. And
right.
I think that's important. And Ron, I know that you're really into this, but it's like I always say, like everybody should go to like the Bird Dog Hall of Fame, right? It's in Grand Junction, Tennessee, because you get to see that the dogs that we run now, those lines were protected and encouraged for so long by so many previous generations
Yeah.
that it's just really incredible to see. And it doesn't matter like what dog you've got. It's like they've
Oh,
got
they have all breeds represented there. I mean, obviously, it was a pointer setter setting.
correct. They've got the Retriever Hall of Fame there too now.
Retriever Hall of Fame. There's
Yeah.
I think the Epinol Breton or the Brittany. NAVDA has a section there for the versatile dogs, and yeah, you're right. That is something I've been there a couple times, and I've always wanted to go back and try to get a couple of the old timers there to talk some of that. You can always learn something from an old guy, other than me.
Oh,
sure can.
it's incredible. I rode around with Delmar Smith and Bob West for an hour one time, and he just explained like, and he'd been going, I think his first national all age there was in like 58 or something. He's been in the game forever. And so it's like he would be able to just, and that's the thing that when you go down there, all those old timers just want to pass that knowledge on to you. It's a really great experience if you ever have the chance to go.
Yeah, I one time I went down there and I had actually myself and three guys, one guy that worked for me, one was a friend of his and another was a friend of mine, but it was the oldest, literally this was an AARP crew. I was the youngest. I was probably 50 and these guys were 60 plus. I had a real simple job to do. It was in Jackson, Mississippi. So we made plans, and at that point, Dave Smith was the curator of the Bird Dog Hall of Fame, and I had some communications with him through NAVDA. And he said if we couldn't get there on time, he'd make sure he'd open it up for us so we could see it. But we got there on time, and then he said to us, he said there was a sporting goods company down there. I don't know if you know that deep a history. The guy's name was Wilson Dunn. It was Dunn's Bird Supply.
Okay.
And he ran basically like a horse and bird tack or dog tack shop down there. Real small thing. But he sold real good quality stuff. He sold scabbards, he sold saddles, sold Russell boots. Like the only store I ever went to, they had Russell boots in a stack, you know. And so I met Wilson once, real briefly, or I shouldn't say I met him, I saw him. And Dave Smith, he goes, "Hey, how would you guys like to meet Wilson? He's going to be eating lunch up at the diner." And Al knew the history and I knew the history. I said, yeah, we got to spend the last part of our lunch with him. We went back to his new store. He closed down the old one and he decided he couldn't not be there for once a year for the big dance, right? So he kind of reopened this little store, he put his office in the back, and he had a wall, and it was probably a 20-foot wall, 3 8x10 pictures high and about 30 across, maybe 30 across. And it was all dogs. And that guy walked us in his office and with this old, he was like 85 and he's walking like Tim Conway and he's talking like this. And he's pointing at every one of them dogs. And he would be like, "Now that dog there, Belle. Now Belle was out of Mary. Mary was a good dog. Now Mary's mom was down there." And you're like, how? How do these people know this much? Somebody asked me what was my dog's name when they met me 4 years. I'm like, I don't know, it was Frankie or Tanzer or I don't know. Those,
It is incredible. I mean, you go to some of these big events like your HRC Grands or your NASTRA National Championships
oh,
and some of these other big ones, and these guys know every single dog that's running. They know them by name. They know where they came from. They know their lineage.
yeah.
They know competition. They know the pros that's running them. I mean, these guys live and breathe this stuff.
Right. I mean, we love it. Those guys, it's in their DNA. It's in their, like if you got a blood transfusion with them, it might not match even if it was type B.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking of that, I got a great way to tie this back into the LTE.
Oh, fantastic. Let's hear it.
So back when I was judging for NAVDA and now I'm judging for the Versatile Hunting Dog Federation, people were always asking if they could wear the collar because we can't have any electronic stimulation on a collar. And people aren't going to say, "Oh, we let him take the prongs off," or, "Oh, he doesn't have." A lot of people probably just wanted that collar on the dog's neck. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the more, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, the more dogs become family members, which in the last 20 years, it's really changed that way, right? I mean, not many dogs don't sleep in the house. And many dogs are a decision with the wife and the husband, right? I wouldn't be surprised. Like I'll write a motion to both clubs that they could use this if the person is worried about losing their dog. And people do worry about losing their dog, especially new people. You know,
yeah.
I mean, we don't want them walking in the field for 30 minutes looking at their phone, but if it's on there, it's a piece of security. It's a peace of mind.
I was at a HRC Grand just this past spring and personally watched a contestant's dog doing great in the trial. Deer comes strolling through, dog starts chasing the deer. I mean, probably chased it over a mile, completely gone. And this dog was gone for 30 minutes. It was a whole rodeo trying to figure out where he was and how to get him back. And had he been wearing something like an Alpha LTE, it would have been easy. Just pull up a phone, see exactly where he's at.
And it's 100% not. It's not a training. That's the beauty of it.
No, it's not a training unit.
You couldn't even.
No, you can't do anything with that one.
Couldn't even if you were like a computer hacker, you couldn't figure out how to make this thing.
No.
No.
I've
Yeah.
said it before. I will continue to say it. And you're right. I think that training really has changed. I mean, you say the last 20 years. I mean, really, you look at the last 40 years too, right? I mean, and it's increasing, and I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think that, and even if everybody's had this happen where it's like your dog can be incredible manners, can always be by your side, everything can be right 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
But that 0.1% of the time where your dog gets lost, everything stops.
Yep.
Everything.
Oh,
Right. So I was just kind of say tracking is an insurance policy from that side. And then there's a real practical side of it too, right? Where you have X amount of time. I mean, like you remember in the days of like before GPS, right? It was
oh
like
yeah.
people, you just, I always joke, it's like if you're hunting with 5 people, you were really hunting with 4 because one person was always rotating in trying to find their dog, you know? And it's just like you only have a limited amount of time. And it's like these things have got, 2.5-second update rates. And so it's like, immediately where your dog's at. And it's like, it could be 40 yards away, it could be 400 yards away. And if it's down and if it's stuck a covey, it's like it could just be there. And without GPS, you could be walking around trying to find it.
Oh
So
yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
real practical side of this as well of like, I only have so much time these days to hunt. And it's like, I'm going to maximize that. And you mentioned the track versus not. There's new collars, and I'll let Patrick kind of dive in here. But for the listeners who don't know, we actually came out with, it was last year. That's it's an incredible new, it's kind of the full size, more traditional. It's the TT25 and
Right.
T20. So if you ever see a Garmin tracking collar that has like an orange GPS receiver cap on it, that is a track only. That's a quick identification for it. But yeah, we just came out with this one. It's the TT25, and it's really just the bee's knees when it comes down to tracking. And Patrick, I know you've worked on this a lot. I'll let you explain it.
What's
Yeah. Well, this is
battery life and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of the most exciting things I think that's come to Garmin dog products since the Garmin and Tritronics acquisition back in 2011.
That is a bold statement.
It's a very bold statement, but I'll tell you why. I mean, first of all,
Oh, oh.
we basically have this. Remember our TT15, TT15Xs, fantastic collars. They tracked up to about 7 miles. But this TT25 is absolutely spectacular. We basically cut the size in half. We added all new LED collar lights, so now you can actually customize the color of the light. So if you're running 8 different dogs, you can have 8 different colors of lights, so you can easily distinguish who's who
On the fly.
in the night. But the biggest improvement that we made in my mind is we actually made it so that these GPS flex bands are removable. So basically 2 screws right here in the base of the unit. You can pop your old one off, pop a new one on. With me growing up through our Garmin support department, 9 out of the 10 collars that we saw come back that were broken had something to do with the GPS receiver, and that's just it's a rubber strap that wears over time, and
Right.
anything
It's caught on things and
it's a tendency, right? So now, rather than having to send your collar into Garmin, wait 2 weeks and get a new collar back, now you can just go online, order a $50 replacement part, pop it off, pop a new one on, you're back up and running. You don't got to send your collar in anymore for that broken GPS wire. So that is the biggest improvement, and that's something that people have been asking for forever out of these collars. And so super, super cool.
I want to hop in the dynamic tracking on that. So we introduced something called dynamic tracking on that one. So effectively it reads what your dog is doing at a moment, right? So if your dog is just laying down, it's going to recognize that and go into a lower power mode. So you're really extending your battery life with that when you're in dynamic tracking mode. And I also just want to throw that the Alpha LTE also has dynamic tracking mode on that one. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
You're good. The other thing too, with these being removable, we've also come out with different length GPS receivers. So for your smaller dogs, like your beagles, or maybe a real small setter, we actually make a 0 length flex band that only sits about this high above the collar. So now you can really shrink this collar strap down. Size is no longer an issue with the TT25. You can basically fit this on just about any dog out there, except maybe a 5-pound Yorkie, but that's about it. These things are truly remarkable, and everything that people have been asking for throughout the TT15 and the TT15X, the longer battery life, the longer tracking capability, the removable GPS band, the smaller size, the inch collar strap. You wouldn't believe how much we hear that. Have all really been answered within this collar. So super excited to have announced it last year, and it's been great thus far. And that we released it when we released the Alpha 300.
Right. That now, just for, I know not to the minute, but what is the typical like, is this an overnight 24-hour battery? Like what like on the LT or the TT25, what's that typical
So
duration?
as with any of our collars, it really depends on what tracking mode you have it set to. So for instance, the TT25 can go down to 2.5-second tracking intervals. And the less frequent tracking interval you have it set at is going to be obviously the less battery life, but these things will get up to about 45 hours of battery, that being the Alpha LTE. So
Oh,
you're looking at a couple days of battery life. If you lose your dog, you got about 2 days to track him down and find him, assuming he's within LTE coverage.
Yeah, and one thing just for people to know there as well, like when we talk about the different rates, and this is good for all kind of Garmin devices or GPS devices, GPS is a very power consumptive technology, right? And so that's why they're offering different rates for track, right? And obviously, if you're having a lower track rate, you get a higher fidelity on your track,
right.
but you're getting lower battery life. So just plan accordingly with how you like hunting, and you can adjust that.
Yeah, because a couple seconds, typically I would say I don't need an update every 2.5 seconds. I just don't. But somebody might.
Sure. And the good thing about the tracking intervals is they're remotely activated, right? So I can have my collar in a 2.5-second tracking interval. If that dog were to go missing or get lost, the first thing that I would do is actually change that tracking interval to a higher interval. That way
Right.
I'm maximizing my battery life. I know that I'm going to get as much juice out of that collar as I possibly can. And then to your point exactly, Ron, I don't need 2.5-second tracking intervals when my dog's lost and I'm trying to track him down.
Right, right. I just want to know that it'll still be on and I'll find him at the end of the day.
Yep,
Boy, is
exactly.
my wife going to be mad when I don't come home with the dog.
Yep.
That's
That's
going to be, that is
exactly right.
not a good scenario for any hunter.
Yeah. One thing I just like, I know I brought it up before, but I'm such a strong believer in it. I always like bringing it up is that, this was with the 200 and the 200i and the 300 and the 300i. When you see an I at the end of a Garmin device like that, if it's a 67i or 300i, that stands for inReach.
Mhm.
Really, everybody listening, really look into it. By the nature of what hunting is and what we do, it's kind of dangerous. We can be by ourselves,
Yeah.
and reach. It's native to the 300i, so it's already incorporated. Really, the price difference between a 300 and a 300i, I think, is like $50. So for an extra $50, you're getting inReach, which is, for those who don't know, it's satellite communication and SOS technology. So you can keep in contact with people back home if you need to and you don't have cell service, but then if something happens, you can trigger an SOS. And I just highly encourage everybody to read about that, learn about it. And what I say is, once you start using it, it's rare that people stop using it.
Yeah, my wife knows about it, and now I still run out of the truck with my 550 plus, but she believes, because she doesn't listen to this podcast, she believes that I have the SOS in my bag. So because I'm old, I'm getting old. I mean, I don't feel it in my head or I feel it in my knees, but I don't feel like I'm old, but shit happens. I mean, it really does. I mean, I got
Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking they're going to have an emergency in the
right,
afternoon.
right, exactly. And uh, I'll wrap it up with a story that a guy told me from Michigan. It's a sad story. It was an older grouse hunter, had two setters. You'll love that. A young setter, like a year and a half old setter, and about a 7 or 8 year old setter. And my friends pulled up to one of their covers that they like to hunt, and they saw a setter, and they go, "Oh, somebody's here." They didn't see a car, but they saw a dog. So obviously the dog can be anywhere from 50 yards to 200 yards away from the owner. And so they decided to go down the road a little bit and say, all right, at least if we go down the road, we're
we'll make sure we don't see another vehicle. And that way, if we don't see another vehicle, then we're going to hunt there. So they stopped there, no vehicle. They started hunting in the woods. And all of a sudden they see this setter again. And they're like, well, that's weird. This setter's like flanking them like a wolf would be flanking you, trying to get your dog. The fellas, the older guy that was hunting with both of his setters told his wife he's fine. She doesn't want him hunting by himself anymore. And he had that fall, and that I don't know what it was, a fatal heart attack. Was it a 2-hour thing? Could he have gotten help? But even if you hunt by yourself and you're not that guy, they ended up, the dog, it was like Lassie. The dog led him back to the owner.
Yeah.
Like, not like with little barks saying Timmy's in the well, Timmy's in the well. But the more they went that way, the more the dog doubled back, and they found the guy. And, long story on all that. But, I've taken headers into holes. I've taken a walk I hunt with friends, but I go off in a different direction. And you hit into a gopher or a woodchuck hole or
that anything can happen. And I mean, the other thing that people don't think about, and now I've got a young daughter now, I think about it all the time, where it's like, everything could be fine when I'm out hunting and I don't have cell service, but if something happens back home and somebody needs to get in contact with me and there's an emergency,
that's
it's two-way communication. So that's that side. And before you wrap this all up, I do have one question for you.
Oh, please.
We were talking before. Are you going to bring one of those old nickel steel pump guns down here to Kansas for a dove hunt, which is happening in like a month or something like that?
Month and a half, man.
I mean, I was in Bass Pro Shop and I saw dove decoys. I was like, oh my God, we're starting again.
I've got the best dove season this year, because the worst is I can't make the opener a dove because I signed up for the World's Master Jiu-Jitsu tournament in Las Vegas for Labor Day. So
are you as a spectator?
No, I'm fighting a bunch of guys my age.
Okay.
So
all right.
I am forfeiting my dove opener to go there and see if I can get my arm broke or my neck choked out or my knee dislocated.
Bring
And then take you out for the rest of the season, huh?
Well, I'm really hoping I don't have to become a duck hunter, Patrick.
Yeah.
There's the Ron we know.
Well, if you ever do become a duck hunter, Ron, you know where to find me.
Is there are there bets allowed on this? Is this a
funny? A lot of my friends ask that same question and I don't think they're putting their money on, but they should put their money on me because it's a 61-year age bracket and up. And I'm going there I've been training a lot and working a lot at it. I'm sorer than hell. My elbows are killing me. Everything's killing me, but I'm forfeiting the opener of dove. When that takes a lot to do, to forfeit the opener of dove. So
it's a big holiday.
It is. It is.
Well, if you somehow decide you're going to cancel that, you can come out with me and Patrick here. All right.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way. If I chicken out or I don't make weight, I'll just come from Vegas to Kansas and we'll go dove hunting.
Perfect.
All right, guys, this has been a ball. I can't wait to see your place. You'll have the studio. You'll have some lights in the studio to look like a studio. And I asked Patrick this the other day, real quick, and you said, "Oh, we didn't have our time scheduled for the Garmin podcast room." And I thought, "Oh, you're starting a podcast," which so many companies do. And you guys did this just so you can do podcasts with other people and communicate. Or is there a little?
We're co-opting the sales department. They put this together. Which I'm fine with it. It's all under the same umbrella here, but I guess that's another tip. Like these guys, they record a lot of the sales team is fantastic. They record a lot of material for people of how products work and new products, like product videos. So if you ever have questions, go to YouTube on that one or podcast.
Yeah, it's a pretty generic audio studio, really. I mean, they do all sorts of product videos and everything out of here, but podcast is one of the many uses it's for, and it's been a lot of fun to have. It's a lot better than trying to set something up in a conference room.
Because
I really feel like a professional right now. I'm surely not.
You do look professional. You got the collared shirts on, and you got the headset on. You're looking like, "Good morning, everybody. Bob Brother, 7:05, 5 minutes after 7."
Starting our new radio show.
Listen, yeah, I joked with Patrick before. It's like we're gonna start a podcast called The Philosophical Pheasant.
Yeah.
Come join us by the fire and just talk hunting. So
And
listen,
it'll
we're
be-
proud. We're proud of our studio, and by the time you get here, we'll
It's
have
gonna
some more
be-
stuff for you. If you have any requests, please let us know, and we'll do our best to accommodate.
and I'll tell people too. My daughter will put this up on YouTube, but mostly people don't listen to podcasts on YouTube. But when we had some mentions and we had some product showing, and so I am going to put this up, and people could go to the YouTube channel and see some of the products. It just adds a little bit of something to it,
Sure.
Guys, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Thanks for being friends. And we just got to make sure that we fire a gun in the field without letting a whole nother year go by to do it. How's that?
All
Yes,
right.
sir, Ron. We greatly appreciate you having us on. It's been an absolute blast.
Thanks so much, Ron. Take care and good luck with the jujitsu thing.
I'm gonna need, what they say from the movie Escanaba.
I don't know what you're doing.
There was a movie called Escanaba in the Moonlight. It was about a
Ah,
deer camp. And he
The
said,
best thing you'll learn it.
right,
Go
when you said to wish you luck in the tournament, the senior guy says to him, he says, "Give a man a little luck and anything he'll do for brains."
Best thing
me.
you learn is how to tap out, Ron.
I got to tap out every day, 4 days a week. That's there's no guys my age to roll with, so everyone thinks that's an advantage. I said, no, some other dumb old guy is in another school and he's rolling with a bunch of 30-year-olds. So I don't think I have an advantage. It's got to be all up here, all up there.
Yep, that's it.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop this recording. I thank you again for coming on. And everybody can get this from wherever they love to get their training collars from, or go direct to Garmin, right? Just like
That's
everything.
correct.
Yep.
All right. Perfect.